The penthouse was a monument to cold precision. Every angle, every shadow was calculated. Sebastian stood in the foyer, his toolbox heavy, his eyes tracing the line where wall met ceiling. It was 9 a.m., but the room felt like it had never seen the morning sun. Silence in such an expensive place is never empty. It presses against your eardrums like deep water. He saw her then. Eleanor. Positioned by the floor-to-ceiling glass, perfectly still. She didn't look back. Her gaze was locked on the distant horizon, fixed and unyielding. To the world, she was a tragedy contained in a sleek, matte black wheelchair. Sebastian didn't see a patient. He saw a structure that had been forced into a collapse. He walked closer, his boots silent on the marble. The air here was aggressively, clinically sterile. He noticed the way her left hand rested. It wasn't relaxed, it was tense, clutching the armrest. A detail. Just a small, insignificant detail that shouldn't exist in a permanent injury. He cleared his throat. The sound shattered the heavy, expensive atmosphere of the room. Eleanor flinched, a sharp, involuntary motion of her shoulder that she immediately tried to mask. She turned slowly, her face a carefully constructed mask of professional, icy indifference. He held her gaze, not with pity, but with the focused attention of a man solving a puzzle. Sebastian moved with the quiet grace of a man who understood how buildings breathed. He ignored the blueprints on the desk, focusing instead on the unnatural alignment of the floor. Every piece of furniture in this room served a singular, restrictive purpose. It wasn't designed for living, it was a cage disguised as an executive office. Eleanor watched him from the shadows, her eyes tracing his movements with silent, mounting suspicion. She had learned to expect intrusion, but never this level of quiet, observational intensity. Sebastian knelt by the baseboard, his fingers brushing the polished marble with sudden purpose. He wasn't looking for structural flaws, he was measuring the space between her and the world. A subtle shift in the floor tile suggested a modification that made no sense for a wheelchair. His heart hammered a steady rhythm, a warning that he was crossing a professional line. He glanced up, catching her reflection in the dark, glass-topped coffee table near her chair. For a second, the mask slipped, he saw the raw, hidden exhaustion in her sharp, blue gaze. He didn't look away, nor did he offer the empty apologies she was accustomed to receiving. Instead, he simply tapped the floor twice, a rhythmic, intentional sound in the oppressive silence. The air between them hummed with the weight of an unspoken, dangerous realization. "What are you doing?"
What do you mean? Where is she?
"I'm checking the stability." "The floor is fine." "But the foundation might be holding something else entirely." You have a gift, Mr. Thorne, for finding flaws where they don't exist.
I assure you, we see everything.
Flaws are rarely where we think they are. There are architectural secrets that reveal themselves only to those who listen. Eleanor stared at her legs, the fabric smooth and unmoving, a cruel, silent landscape. Her breath hitched, a faint, tiny tremor rippling through her calf for a split second. She froze, her heart racing against the weight of a hope she couldn't afford to keep. The room went cold the moment Marcus entered, his presence a heavy, polished shadow. Eleanor straightened her posture, the icy mask of the CEO snapping instantly into place. Marcus leaned over her desk, his smile practiced, reaching out to touch the leather armrest. The contractors are a distraction, Eleanor.
This day would come. I always get what I want, eventually.
She didn't flinch, but her fingers gripped the armrest until her knuckles turned porcelain white. She thought of the floor, the tap of Sebastian's finger, the impossible vibration in her own calf. I find his work necessary.
There's no turning back now. We knew the risks when we started this.
Marcus laughed, a low sound that didn't reach his eyes. He lingered near her chair, his shadow falling across her legs like a dark, stifling blanket. Eleanor felt the familiar paralysis, not physical, but the weight of his systematic control. She looked at the door, half expecting Sebastian to return. But the office remained empty, filled only with the scent of Marcus's expensive, clinical cologne. She retreated into the silence, the hope of the morning now a dangerous, buried ember. Outside, the rain began to lash against the glass, a chaotic drumbeat against the silence. She wasn't just waiting for the storm to pass, she was waiting for the foundation to break. The silence after Marcus left was heavy, thick with the scent of his cologne. Eleanor moved her wheelchair toward the desk, her eyes scanning the shadows he left behind. She remembered Sebastian's words, foundation might be holding something else entirely. Her hand trembled as she reached for the hidden panel near the baseboard. She had lived here for 5 years, yet the architecture felt suddenly, terrifyingly foreign. A flicker of light caught her eye, a microscopic lens glinting in the dark wood. Her heart hammered, not in fear, but in a cold, precise realization of betrayal. She didn't panic, she simply maneuvered a heavy file folder to cover the device. Her movements were practiced, the cold efficiency of a woman used to hiding everything. She thought of Sebastian, the man who saw structure where she only saw steel. If the house was a cage, she had just found the first wire she could bend. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window, a ghost in her own kingdom. Her legs felt heavy, dead weight, yet the memory of the tremor burned in her mind. She began to breathe, using the rhythm Sebastian had hinted at, a quiet, internal defiance. The storm raged outside, but inside, the architect had begun to draw a different path. The door opened with a familiar, mechanical click that set Eleanor's teeth on edge. She was seated by the desk, a report open, her expression a perfect mirror of indifference. Marcus walked in, his eyes darting toward the hidden camera's location. "You've been quiet today, Eleanor."
You just don't have a choice in the matter.
She kept her eyes on the page, the words blurring under the intensity of his scrutiny. "I'm working, Marcus. The quarterly projections require absolute focus."
The past can haunt us.
He didn't answer, his presence a dark, suffocating weight pressing down on her shoulders.
I know I can.
She felt the phantom rhythm in her legs, a persistent, rhythmic pulsing, begging for movement. Marcus reached out, his hand hovering inches from the file folder covering the camera. Eleanor held her breath, the air in the room turning brittle, ready to shatter at a touch. He shifted the file, his fingers brushing the edge, but he didn't uncover the lens. "Sebastian Thorne will not be back tomorrow."
One wrong move, and everything we've built comes crashing down.
Her heart skipped, a sharp jolt of terror, but she forced her hand to remain steady. "That is your decision to make."
From us, but we know everything. There is no escape now.
She watched him walk away, knowing now that the architect had become her only hope. Midnight in the penthouse was a vacuum of sound, the city lights below like distant, uncaring stars. Eleanor sat on the floor, the cold marble biting into her skin, a sharp, necessary reality. She followed the rhythmic breathing Sebastian had taught her, a lifeline in the suffocating silence. She focused on her core, on the tension buried deep within her, waiting for a signal. Her left leg twitched, a tiny, microscopic defiance against the long, frozen years of stillness. She gasped, the sound thin and fragile, as she pressed her palms hard against the floor. Marcus would be returning at dawn, his suspicion already a tightening coil around her throat. She needed to know if the cage was built of steel or simply her own learned helplessness. Her calf muscles tightened, a dull, aching fire that felt more like life than anything else. She moved her hand, touching the baseboard where she had hidden the camera from Marcus. The room felt different now, no longer a tomb, but a puzzle she was beginning to solve. Outside, the rain continued its relentless, chaotic rhythm, echoing the pounding of her heart. She was no longer just the CEO of a billion-dollar empire, she was a woman reclaiming her gravity. Every breath was a note in a secret song, a melody only she and the architect understood. She pulled herself up, just an inch, before the weight of the years pulled her back down. The night air in the penthouse was thick, charged with the static of unspoken rebellion. Eleanor gripped the edge of the heavy mahogany desk, her fingers white with intense effort. She pushed upward, her core burning, a searing line of fire connecting brain to muscle. For 3 seconds, she stood, a fragile tower of willpower against the gravity of 5 years. Her knees trembled, a violent, uncontrollable shake that threatened to shatter her composure. She collapsed back into the chair, gasping, her body drenched in the sweat of victory. It was only 3 seconds, but it was 3 seconds of freedom Marcus couldn't steal. A soft chime echoed from the hallway. Marcus was testing the security locks again. She moved the file folder back, shielding the camera lens with the practiced calm of a spy. Her heart raced, not from the physical exertion, but from the thrill of the hunt. Marcus entered, his eyes scanning the room, searching for the crack in her facade. "You seem different, Eleanor." She adjusted her blazer, her pulse slowing to a steady, deceptive rhythm of control. Change is inevitable when one has nothing left to lose.
I always get what I want.
She watched him walk away, knowing now that the architect had become her only hope. The morning sun fractured through the tall glass, casting long, sharp beams across her desk. Among the invoices, she found a small, rough-hewn piece of oak with a single line carved deep. It wasn't just wood, it was a blueprint for the path she needed to walk toward the window. Her fingers traced the grain, the rough texture a grounding anchor in her chaotic morning. Marcus strode into the room, his presence smelling of ozone and manufactured authority. He stared at the piece of wood on her desk, his eyes narrowing into thin, suspicious slits. "This is clutter, Eleanor," he said, his hand hovering over the object with malicious intent. She felt a surge of cold fury, but her face remained a perfectly crafted, icy mask. "It's a sample for the renovation," she replied, her voice steady and chillingly detached. He snatched it up, turning it over in his fingers, searching for a hidden meaning. She watched him, her heart vibrating in time with the rhythm Sebastian had taught her. For a moment, the room felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the truth to shatter. He dropped the wood back onto the mahogany desk with a sharp, dismissive clatter. "Clear it out," he commanded, then turned and marched toward the heavy office door. She waited until he left, then picked up the oak, her first real map to freedom. The night was a canvas of shadows, and Eleanor moved with the precision of a thief. She used the reflection in a small compact mirror to map the blind spots of the room. Every angle Marcus thought he controlled was now a secret vulnerability she was exploiting. She spotted it, a hairline crack in the ventilation panel behind the heavy mahogany bookshelf. It wasn't just a vent, it was a vein, pulsing with the cables of the building's nervous system. She leaned forward, the strain in her legs a familiar, throbbing song of awakening life. If she could reach the wiring, she could sever the eyes that Marcus used to watch her. She heard a faint vibration, a low, rhythmic hum echoing through the wall's hollow center. It was the sound of the surveillance hub, the mechanical heartbeat of her own prison. She realized with a chilling clarity, the building was not protecting her, it was studying her. A sudden creak from the corridor froze her. Marcus was returning, his footsteps uneven, hurried. She retreated, her movements fluid and silent, sliding back into the safety of the wheelchair. She held the mirror against her palm, a tiny shard of glass that reflected her growing resolve. Marcus walked in, his eyes searching, but he saw only a woman trapped in her own silence. She sat perfectly still, her own silence now a weapon of defiance. The night hung heavy, a velvet shroud over the city that pulsed beneath her feet. Eleanor pulled the panel aside, the cold air from the shaft welcoming her like an old friend. She slid into the darkness, her legs aching, a testament to the life fighting to return. She navigated the narrow, humming passage with the focused instinct of an architect. In the dim glow of the wires, she saw a file cabinet, forgotten and caked in dust. She pried it open, the screech of metal a jarring alarm in the silence of the night. Inside lay her medical history, not the version Marcus gave her, but the original truth. Every diagnosis was a lie, every specialist appointment, a carefully staged theatrical performance. She was never paralyzed, she had been chemically sedated, a hostage to her own empire. The realization hit her with the force of a landslide, cold, suffocating, and absolute. She gripped the papers, the ink blurring as her vision swam with a mix of fury and relief. A heavy thud sounded from the office. Marcus was back, and he was not alone. She tucked the documents into her jacket, her heart drumming a frantic, desperate rhythm. The shadows in the shaft seemed to lean in, threatening to swallow her whole. She had the proof of the cage, but now she had to find a way to break it. The morning arrived with a gray, unforgiving light that seemed to expose every secret. Marcus entered the office followed by two men in white, sterile, cold, and utterly detached. Eleanor sat in her chair, her hands hidden, the stolen documents pressing against her ribs. "The progress is stalling," Marcus said, his voice a razor blade wrapped in silk.
They will be severe.
She didn't move, her heart a frantic bird trapped in the cage of her chest. "We need to recalibrate the dosage," Marcus continued, nodding to the doctors behind him.
Closely, but you should prepare for the worst.
She saw the needle glinting in the pale light, a tiny, metallic promise of oblivion. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to run, to scream, to shatter the facade. But she stayed still, the rhythm Sebastian taught her becoming a shield against the panic. She focused on the door, on the memory of the shaft, on the promise of the oak map. "I don't need more sedation," she said, her voice small, a perfectly rehearsed performance. Marcus stepped closer, his shadow engulfing her, his eyes searching for a crack in her resolve. She looked up, her blue eyes wide, glassy with the manufactured fear of a helpless victim. He hesitated, his hand reaching for her shoulder, a gesture that felt like a burial. She held her breath, the needle hovering, waiting for the moment to strike back. The night air was electric, a storm brewing both outside the window and inside her mind. Eleanor tapped a rhythmic sequence on the ventilation panel, a Morse code of pure, cold defiance. Somewhere in the dark bowels of the building, she prayed the architect was listening. She had mapped every blind spot, every second of latency in Marcus's digital fortress. The door to the penthouse groaned, a low, ominous sound that signaled Marcus's return. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded over the stolen files, her posture a lie of weakness. Marcus didn't look at her, he was obsessed with his tablet, watching the feed from her room. He didn't know that the feed was looping, a pre-recorded illusion she had carefully spliced. She watched him walk past, a man so enamored with his own control that he was blind. The clock on the wall counted down, a metronome marking the time until the world shifted. A sudden surge of power flickered through the lights, a whisper from Sebastian in the dark. Marcus cursed, his composure splintering for the first time as the screens went black. Eleanor felt the shift in the room, the absence of the mechanical eye that had haunted her. She gripped her armrests, the strength returning to her muscles like a rising tide. The cage was losing its bars, and the architect was ready to open the door. The darkness was a relief, a cool, silent blanket that draped over the penthouse. Eleanor stood, her legs trembling with a strength she had not felt in half a decade. Every step was a conscious negotiation with her own nervous system, a map she was redrawing. She reached the door, her hand hovering over the handle, the cold metal a final test. Outside, the corridor was a labyrinth of shadows, silent save for the hum of the emergency lights. She navigated with the memory of the blueprints she had studied for years in her mind. Marcus's voice echoed from the far end of the hallway, a frantic, desperate bark of commands. She pressed herself into a shallow wall alcove, her breath shallow and sharp in the gloom. He walked past her, his silhouette tall and imposing, his eyes searching the dark in vain. She waited, counting the heartbeats until the sound of his footsteps faded into the distance. The path to the elevator was clear, a straight line of light through the heavy, oppressive dark. Her legs, once dead weight, carried her forward with a newfound, terrifying autonomy. She reached the elevator, her fingers stabbing the call button with a sense of pure liberation. The doors slid open, revealing a sanctuary of steel that promised a world beyond the cage. She stepped inside, leaving the architect of her prison to wander the halls of his own failure. The morning air hit her skin, a crisp, clean breath of freedom she hadn't tasted in years. She stepped out of the elevator, her gait steady, the phantom pain replaced by solid ground. The lobby was a gallery of startled faces, eyes wide as they saw the woman they thought broken. She didn't look back at the tower, it was merely a structure of cold stone and lies. In her hand, she clutched the oak map, her symbol of the path she had courageously carved. Outside, the city was waking up, oblivious to the earthquake occurring inside the glass monolith. She saw the news scrolling on the giant screens: financial fraud, internal medical coercion, exposed. Marcus appeared at the glass entrance, his face a mask of shattered arrogance and pale disbelief. He looked smaller now, a man stripped of the shadows he used to hide his hollow soul. Eleanor walked past him, her presence filling the space he had once tried to restrict. She reached the curb, the sun illuminating the transformation of a prisoner into a leader. Sebastian waited by his truck, his eyes reflecting a quiet pride, a mirror to her journey. She took her first real step toward him, the weight of the past falling away like dust. The cage was gone, the architect was free, and the story had finally, truly begun. She looked toward the horizon, a woman standing tall, walking into a future she had built herself.